All right, Tony Bevilacqua here coming at you from Athletic After 40. So, hey, what I want to do is go over something with you that I've been working on for a while. I've been trying to put together sort of a mental model of why staying fit, staying healthy, looking good, feeling good, why it's so much easier for me as opposed to a lot of other folks, right? When we start thinking about getting into better shape, doing some exercise, eating good foods, sleeping good at night, managing our stress, when we start thinking of all these things, it can be sort of overwhelming, right? It's like, oh my goodness, I've got to do all of these things. I know I need to do it, but it's so hard for me, right? It's so hard for me to change my habits. It's so hard for me to change my eating. It's so hard for me to find time in my day. These are the things, the mental things I hear from a lot of guys who have good intentions, but just can't seem to get themselves there because of how much of a struggle it is. And for me, it's very, very easy, right? So what I want to do is I put together this model, and this model will explain exactly why that is, why it's so easy for me. And true to full disclosure, it wasn't always easy for me. And maybe if you can see this, like if you can see this drawn out in a model, in sort of a timeline, this will make a little bit more sense to you. And it will give you the inspiration to want to start moving yourself forward, to get you to want to start embarking on this journey and looking at it a little bit differently than maybe what you've done in the past. Because there's a lot of guys that have sort of been all in and then all out, right? They go all in, they do all the work, they even get a result, they're looking amazing, they feel great, and then all of a sudden they stop, right? And that's a problem. So here's what it takes. Let me show you. And I've got a lot of this drawn out already, so I'm just going to move my camera here so you can see what I'm working on. All right, so make sure that cord isn't in the way. So I call it the athlete identity effort curve, because one of the things we want to do is we want to change your identity. And this is the problem for most guys, right? Because when they embark on the journey, right, when they get themselves started, if they don't start working on some of the mental stuff, their identity doesn't really change. So let's say you're coming into this whole thing, let's say you're coming into this thing thinking that you're a fat guy, right? And I'm just going to use this as an example. Like, I'm a fat guy. I look in the mirror and I tell myself, look, I'm a fat guy. Like, I'm gonna try to make these changes. I'm gonna try to lose some weight, but you never really do the work to start seeing yourself differently. And if you don't do the work to see yourself differently, I don't care how much success you get, it's never going to last, right? We have to do some of the mental stuff, right? So that comes with changing your identity. It comes with changing who you are as a person, okay? So to do that, this is the process that we need to go through, right? And on this side, you can see I've got effort here, right? This is high effort, this is low effort. And then the bottom line is time, right? So that we have to, of course, put some time behind this whole thing. And the very first thing that we all need to do is we all need to start with action. We need to start taking action. We have to be motivated enough to be able to say, look, I'm going to start doing things. And what are those actions? Eating better food, right? Making sure that you're eating the right things, making sure that you're doing some exercise, making sure that you're looking at what your stress levels are, making sure that you're focusing on your sleep. Like, these are the things, these are the actions that we need to take, and it's where everybody needs to start. Right? We need to start with actions. And initially, when we get started on this journey, what is the effort like? It's super high, right? Like, it's really, really hard to make these changes. We're constantly wrestling with the changes. It's like a wrestling match, and you're like a beginner, like you're coming in, it's like walking off the street into a Brazilian jiu-jitsu gym and being like, okay, let's do this. And they match you up with somebody who's been doing it for a very long time. And obviously you're going to get your butt kicked and it's very hard. But if you keep showing up and you keep showing up and you keep showing up and you keep doing some of the mental work, because even these actions, even the mental stuff is hard at this point in time. It's hard to envision yourself with a new identity and what I call the athlete identity, right? So this whole first part, right, the whole beginning is just, it's a wrestling match. It's hard, right? And we need to do a lot of the mental work here to be able to change how it is that we perceive ourselves. And as we do that, as we start getting closer to the athlete identity, which is down here, this is the athlete identity, this is where the transformation occurs, right? As we start doing this work, as we continue to wrestle with this, right, we get ourselves to a place where all of a sudden we start creating habits, right? Now this wrestling match becomes easier. We're starting to install the new beliefs, the new thoughts, right? And it no longer becomes just like a wrestling match with actions, but you start developing the habits of choosing better foods, of making the time in your day to go and exercise. It becomes easier. The effort goes down, right, as you start to develop habits, right? But we're still not quite there yet, right? We still have more work to do because it takes more time to develop this new identity. And even your mindset around this stuff needs to be a habit. What do I mean by that? Like, if I'm wrestling with my old identity here, if I'm old Tony, who just used to eat everything that he could and drink tons of beer and not care about the way he looked or felt, right, then I would need to build a new habit around the way that I thought about myself. I would need to start building new habits so that I could squash those old beliefs, those old thoughts, right? And as I can do that, that's where, that's even a habit in and of itself. The way you think is a habit. Okay, so if I can start seeing myself as an athlete, right? Someone who values their health, their fitness, so that they can be the best versions of themselves to deliver into the world, right? And be the best, create the most impact in the world, then that's where we get to the athlete identity, right? So if I continue down this road and I keep working on my habits and I keep working on my thoughts and I keep doing the actions, right? Then what's ultimately going to happen? There's a transition point. There's a point on this timeline where we literally become that new person. This is the transformation event. Everything leading up to this is wrestling and installing. That's all it is, right? And there's even a transition point where you sort of go from the wrestling match into the habits, but you're not quite here yet. You've got to spend some time in habits before you get to this. And then once you get to this, right now, I always say to people, like, it's easy for me. It's easy for me to make the right choices, right? This no longer becomes an effort. It's easy for me to go to the gym. It's easy for me to prioritize myself. It's easy for me to say no to the cake. That's the place where we want to get to, right? That's the place. That's where we want it. Like, for me, I take it for granted. For myself, I take it for granted because that's who I am. It's very hard to sway me. Peer pressure, everything, social pressures, all the things that would derail someone who starts off in this journey does not derail me. But I had to go through the battle. I had to do the wrestling match. I had to work on my habits, even when I didn't completely 100% believe in the new version of myself. I knew I could get there, but I knew I had work to do. And that's where you just have to buckle down, but you have to see that it's going to get easier, right? And hopefully this model makes sense to you. This explains why it's easy for me. It's not my genetics. It's none of that stuff. Although that's what a lot of people want to say. Those are excuses. You can become this new person, but I'm telling you, it's not easy. It's not easy. And if you never go into this process without doing the mental work, without the intention of changing who you believe that you are, again, it's never going to get easy. And you're going to go through the wrestling match and then you'll fall off the wagon. And then you'll go through the wrestling match and then you'll fall off the wagon. And then you'll go through the wrestling match and then you'll fall off the wagon. That's what happens to people who don't really understand what it means to change your thoughts, right? And that's one of the things that we need to do. Like, one of the things that we do in the Athletic After 40 program, because a lot of guys are coming in, they're not where they want to be yet, right? And I was using sort of overweight, not a shape, right? But you could even be an athlete. If somebody comes to me and they're already an athlete, but they're not happy with where they're at, we need to change who they want to be. There's an interesting thing. Like, I was having a conversation with my good friend Justin, who's a physical therapist. He's one of the coaches in the Athletic After 40 group. And we were having this discussion about, like, where do the Michael Jordans come from? Where does that that mentality come from? Like, he was a winner 100% of the time. He never, like, that was his identity. He just expected him to win. You know, it's incredible, the mindset, the strength of that conviction to that mindset, who he was as a person. So what's the difference between somebody who makes it to the NBA and somebody who dominates the NBA? It's what's going on up here, right? If I just want to make it to the NBA and I do all the action, I wrestle and I build the habits, I'm going to get to the NBA. But it's not until I change my identity again to dominating, right? And that's a scary place for a lot of people, you know? So I'm not even asking you to go to that level, but you can see how this model works for everybody. And then for Michael Jordan, it wasn't easy, but it was easy for him, right? Compared to somebody else. He was there. He built that into his thoughts, and then there was nobody else that could manifest. It was him. It became him. He became the winner. He didn't just play in the NBA. He dominated the NBA, right? So this model applies to everybody, applies to every time you want to go from one place to another. You have to keep changing the thoughts in your head. You have to keep reinventing yourself. And to do that, you have to go through the wrestling match. And the more you do it with the longer game perspective in mind, the easier this becomes. All right, so hopefully this makes sense. All right, and look, if you'd like help on this journey, this is what I do. This is what I've done. This is how I've helped folks for years and years and years in the health, fitness, nutrition space. And this is the transformation that I've gone through. I've never really been able to articulate it very well, but the more I think about it, the more I process it, like, this is it. Now you have it. You have the model. You have you know exactly what you need to do to get there. Now we got to fill in tactics and strategies. And the interesting thing about having a coach, is it's going to shorten these timelines, right? You can do this on your own. 100% you can do this on your own, but it's going to take you longer, right? If you know where you want to go, right? If you know where you want to go, if you know the person that you want to become, if you want to shorten that timeline, which is what successful people do, they pay for time, right? Because they know it's their most valuable resource. The coach, a good coaching program, will get you there in shorter, in a reduced period of time. We can literally take a year and crunch it down into 3 to 6 months, right? All right, look, if you like my help, let me know. Otherwise, hopefully this makes sense. Let me know where you're at on this. What is your identity right now? What are you kind of playing with, and where would you like to be? And on a scale of 1 to 10, do you think it's possible? You know, do you think it's possible? That's it. Do you think it's possible? Because if you don't, you may get a result, but it's never going to last. You got to believe it. And it's believing in yourself. All right, rock on, athlete. Let's go. Go get some work done. Go take some action.